Hello, good evening. You're watching the Politics Hub. We're going to get straight to some big breaking news tonight. Peter Mandelson has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. These are the pictures of his arrest, which show him being led away from his home by police officers and into an unmarked car shortly after the Metropolitan Police said this in a statement. Officers have arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in public office. He was arrested at an address in Camden on Monday, the 23rd of February, and has been taken to a London police station for interview. This follows search warrants at two addresses in the Wiltshire and Camden areas. Well, we should say straight away that Lord Mandelson has repeatedly denied all wrongdoing. He previously apologised for maintaining his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which he admitted went on too long. Well, as you can see, we have packed the studio tonight with top talent to discuss throughout the hour. We will get their thoughts very shortly. But first, let's go straight to our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates, who's in Greater Manchester. Sam, I mean, hard to overstate the significance of all of this for the Labour Party, isn't it?
That's right, Ali. With that short Metropolitan Police statement, a seismic moment for politics. You saw Lord Mandelson, Peter Mandelson, being led away in the gilet, face thunderous by the Metropolitan Police. It's a significant moment, as you say, hard to overstate. Just 6 months ago, he was one of the half-dozen most senior figures in Keir Starmer's government. He was our man in Washington, subject to the secrets and the relationship with Donald Trump. Now, his career in ruins and facing police investigation following that arrest in public, in the glare of the public light earlier this afternoon. This is a tragedy of proportions for the Labour Party, and it is an incredibly perilous moment for Lord Mandelson. The allegation is that he passed confidential government secrets to the paedophile Jeffrey Epstein when he was business secretary in Gordon Brown's government in the late 2000s. That is at the heart of the allegation of misconduct in public office that the Metropolitan Police say they have arrested Peter Mandelson and are interviewing him as we speak about. But this is a treacherous moment for Keir Starmer as well, because it was Keir Starmer personally who overrode all of the objections, who cast aside all of the doubts about Lord Mandelson. His checkered previous career, his links to Jeffrey Epstein after the point at which he was jailed for his engagement with young women. All of that put aside in order to put Peter Mandelson in the embassy in Washington to manage the return of Donald Trump for the second time and Britain's relationship with his White House. They decided that Peter Mandelson was, in the words of a cabinet minister, worth the risk because of his ability to help forge that relationship. Far from clear that even Peter Mandelson's ability to do that was beyond doubt. Complaints from the Trump White House that he wound them up didn't forge the closest of relationships. But really, the disaster for Labour, much broader than that, as Keir Starmer faces questions about why he gave in to the suggestion, persistent suggestion from his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, to appoint Lord Mandelson, with whom Morgan McSweeney was very close. Why he chose not to interrogate the allegations about Jeffrey Epstein that were in the public domain at the point of his appointment more closely, that might have provided the kind of red flag that would have stopped that appointment. Instead, Peter Mandelson was sacked last September and now is with the police under allegations, being questioned under allegations of misconduct in public office at an absolutely perilous moment for Keir Starmer himself. It's the last thing he wants, his judgment being questioned at this point, as he faces the potential of a difficult by-election this week, potentially catastrophic elections in May. There are figures in his own cabinet who are circling to potentially take over from him, and he is recording some of the worst polling on record for any Prime Minister. The events of today are the last thing Keir Starmer would have wanted to see.
And the timing, Sam, is interesting, isn't it? Because we have the Chief Secretary to the Prime Minister, Darren Jones, just before we find out that Peter Mandelson's been arrested, saying that we're going to get some of the documents relating to his appointment as soon as next week.
That's right. The arrest is not the only bit of bad news for Keir Starmer when it comes to Peter Mandelson. A vote in Parliament, a manoeuvre by the Tories in Parliament a couple of weeks ago, is forcing the government to disclose potentially tens of thousands of pieces of correspondence involving Peter Mandelson, about Peter Mandelson, in the run-up and duration of his time as ambassador. That they are being required to disclose after essentially losing the argument with their own MPs to try and keep stuff secret. Now Keir Starmer faces wave upon wave of the kind of documentation revealing the inner workings of our diplomacy and our political system that no government would find easy to withstand, reaching the glare of publicity, that no government would find in any way comfortable. And that is now coming. Disclosure starting as early as next week, we are told. Some documents held back because of the police investigation and fears it could compromise that. But I think even the smallest amount will be picked upon now and will provide another reason, another area of danger for Keir Starmer in the weeks and months ahead. OK,
thanks so much, Sam Coates. Well, Sky's Molly Malone is outside Peter Mandelson's house in North London. Molly, can you just remind us of what exactly happened there?
Well, we've known for weeks that police have been investigating Peter Mandelson. We've seen them conduct searches here at this central London home near Regent's Park, but also another property linked to Peter Mandelson in Wiltshire. But that significant development came just after 5 o'clock this evening, after the Metropolitan Police confirmed that they'd arrested a 72-year-old man on suspicion of misconduct in a public office. And we saw those pictures of Peter Mandelson being led out of his property by police officers. Now, this is all, as we know, after allegations that had been mounting for a couple of weeks after the release of a load of documents related to the convicted paedophile and financier Jeffrey Epstein. And we appeared in some of those documents to see Peter Mandelson communicating with him, with allegations suggesting that he'd been sending Jeffrey Epstein sensitive government, market-sensitive information while he was in government, at the heart of the new Labour government, while he was a cabinet minister and while he was business secretary, appearing allegations suggesting that he was offering details, sensitive government details and details of an EU bailout. Now, we should say that Peter Mandelson has long denied any wrongdoing. He'd previously said sorry and admitted that his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein had gone on for too long, but he hadn't been responding to specific allegations, though had been denying any wrongdoing. What will be happening to him this evening, though, is that despite the fact that he was at the very heart of the Downing Street operation, despite the fact that until very recently he was a top diplomat, he was Britain's man in Washington, he will, in the eyes of the law, be treated in the same way as any other detainee, any other citizen that had been arrested. He will be checked in to custody, into police custody, an undisclosed police station. He will have his DNA swabbed, he will be searched, and then he will face police questioning. We've been hearing from police commentators throughout the course of the last couple of hours, and our own Graham Wetton making the point that police actually made this arresting Peter Mandelson fairly late in the day, so saying that it's not typical really for police to conduct interviews in the early hours of the morning. So Graham Wetton suggesting that we could have a situation where Peter Mandelson is perhaps held in a cell overnight and then further questioned tomorrow morning. The truth, though, is that really we don't know at the moment. They are in the early stages of their investigation, and it will be now for the legal process to play out. OK, Molly, thank you very much. You can see live pictures there outside Peter Mandelson's house in Camden. Well, earlier, my colleague Mark Austin got the reaction from Skills Minister Baroness Jackie Smith shortly after news of Peter Mandelson's arrest broke.
I was the Home Secretary, so I think I know better than to comment on what is clearly an ongoing police investigation. The police will do what they need to do in relation to this arrest and this investigation. But I suppose it just behoves us once again to remember, first of all, that anybody who knows anything about Jeffrey Epstein should, of course, be providing that information. And once again, we need to keep at the heart of our thoughts the victims of his activity, and that's what I'll be doing this evening.
These are images which will not go down well in Downing Street at all. More problems for Keir Starmer, because it does reflect on Keir Starmer's decision to appoint him as ambassador to Washington in the first place.
Well, of course, as soon as Keir Starmer understood what the reality of Peter Mandelson's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein was, he sacked him. In the middle of the night, actually. So, I think that's an important area of judgment. But, yeah, of course, to be frank, I mean, I'm here today to talk about a really important set of reforms that the government is undertaking for children in our schools with special educational needs. That's what I'd rather be talking about.
Well, isn't this the issue here, that here we are, Peter Mandelson is on the left of your screen, and we're not going to move away from this story? I mean, isn't that the problem about the way that Peter Mandelson behaved? We don't know whether he's, guilty of misconduct in public office or not, but it is dominating the news, and you're not getting in what you want to talk about, which is schools.
Well, it is at this moment, and I think I've been pretty clear about our responsibility as public servants to allow the police to get on with their investigation. But for years to come, what will make a real difference to our children is whether or not we've got an education system that allows them to achieve their full potential, including those children with special educational needs. And that's the reason why today we've made important announcements about how we invest more money in providing the support that those children need without their parents having to fight lengthy legal battles to get that support for their children.
OK. The other thing we've learned in the last few minutes is that the Chief Secretary, Darren Jones, has said that the government expects to publish this first tranche of documents relating to Peter Mandelson's appointment as US ambassador in early March. How embarrassing could that be for the government? I mean, these will quite possibly be a huge tranche, including personal, correspondence and messages between Prime Minister and Mandelson and other people at the heart of Downing Street and Peter Mandelson.
Well, of course, the reason why they're being published is because the Prime Minister has been absolutely clear that he wants full transparency about the process of appointing Peter Mandelson, as well as reviewing the way in which those appointments, and particularly that the vetting happens. You can't have it both ways, Mark. If that wasn't happening, you'd be saying to me, why is there not more transparency? The Prime Minister took swift action against Peter Mandelson when the extent of his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein became clear, and he's now making sure that the information and messages around that are being released as effectively as possible, whilst, of course, not prejudicing any investigations that are underway at the moment.
Right. I mean, but you can't have it both ways either, because Keir Starmer made the decision in the first place.
And that's part of what the messages will identify. It's part of the reason why Keir Starmer, having apologised for making that decision, is now making sure that all of the information around it is available for people to see. OK, and just finally, Mel Stride described this as a dark day for Downing Street. I mean, he's right, isn't it? It is another dark day for Downing Street. Well, yeah, in some ways, as you've identified, it's not what we want to talk about. More importantly, I don't think it's what those parents currently struggling to get the sort of support for their children with special educational needs that they want are also primarily interested in. What they want to hear from me is reassurance that we will put in place for their children the additional support at an earlier stage to enable them to make the most of their lives in schools and to reach their full potential. And that's what we've been talking about today, both the £4 billion worth of additional investment, the way in which that will enable more children to get the support they need in the schools, which will enable them to learn alongside their friends and to achieve everything that they can out of our school system. That's what I've been focused on today.
Right, well, Baroness, I'm glad you were able to talk about that, at least at the end there, because we do, as you know, and you'll be aware, have this story to cover. But Baroness, thank you very much indeed for coming on.
Well, that was the immediate response there from the government. Well, in the last half hour, we have heard from the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, who's given her reaction.
This is the defining moment of Keir Starmer's premiership. Watching the man who he appointed to the highest position in our diplomatic service getting arrested by police, I think is an image that's going to stay with all of us for many, many years to come. And when people think about Keir Starmer and his premiership, they will see the arrest of Peter Mandelson as the defining moment.
What does it say about the Prime Minister's leadership, and how much longer can he go on for?
Well, I think that the fact that I asked him if he had full confidence in Peter Mandelson just a few months ago, and he said yes, despite all of these allegations being known. Only to see the man arrested shows that the Prime Minister has a terrible judgment. He's weak. He could have done more. He has not released the information around the files. Instead, he sacked the person who was supposed to be overseeing the release. I think that shows what kind of person the Prime Minister is.
Will you be calling for him to stand down?
Well, actually, what I'm calling for first is for him to release the Mandelson files. We had a vote in Parliament, the humble address. I led on this. I'm the person who's been holding him to account on this issue. He has promised to release the files, and he hasn't done so. I think before he goes, he needs to be transparent and let us see what is, what it is that has been hidden for so long. We need to know. It is Parliament's job to hold government to account. He's been hoping that people would have been distracted by the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. I have said I'm not going to be distracted. My job is to hold him to account. He has not released those files. Everybody knows why. He's instead sacked the person who was overseeing the release. He needs to release those files now. And if he can't do that, then he absolutely should go, because it goes back to his judgment, the fact that this is a cover-up. Let's see the files.
Once we see those files, do you anticipate that it's not going to be much longer left for Keir Starmer?
I think it's already time running out for Keir Starmer. He does not have authority in his party. In Parliament today, we saw Labour MP after Labour MP attack the government. They are not a happy bunch. He is now a hostage to his backbenchers, and it's a matter of when he goes, not if he goes.
Final question. This is a low point for the government. How bad really is it?
This is an extremely low point for the government. I think that it could actually get worse, because they do not have a plan for government. They do not know why they are there. They just wanted to be in government, and that's why they're flailing around. And in fact, it is the things that I've been doing that are getting them to shift the agenda, whether it is on reversing the family farms tax, whether it is on what they did with winter fuel, the national grooming gang scandal, even today talking about scrapping the interest on student loan payments because it's not fair. The government has been nowhere to be seen. They've got nothing to say because they don't know what to do.
There, as you can see, here with me in the studio to discuss this big story, our panel, Plaid Cymru Westminster leader Liv Saville-Roberts, journalist and broadcaster Daisy McAndrew, along with our political commentator Adam Baldson. Thanks all for joining us this evening. Adam, let's start with you. I mean, it's hard to overstate the significance of Peter Mandelson, the architect in New Labour, and 6 months ago, our man in Washington.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a very long history, more than 40 years, as a key figure in the Labour Party, and really the judgment of all the successive Labour leaders, except Jeremy Corbyn, perhaps, is called into question now, because he worked with Tony Blair. He was an architect of New Labour. It was then Gordon Brown, actually, who brought him back into government in the period which, according to these Epstein files, was when Peter Mandelson was passing information to Jeffrey Epstein, for which he's now being investigated for misconduct in public office. And then, of course, not knowing what was in the Epstein files, and, as he says, having been lied to by Peter Mandelson about the extent of his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein, the Prime Minister took the gamble, the present Prime Minister took the gamble of sending him to Washington. There were good reasons for that. He'd been twice Trade Secretary in the Cabinet. He'd been the European trade negotiator. So given that trade was so important, given also, frankly, that having some fairly sinuous political skills was also deemed to be important to deal with the Trump administration, you could see why he took that gamble. And you can see that there was division within Downing Street at the time. Clearly, Morgan McSweeney thought it was a good idea. Others didn't think it was a good idea. Keir Starmer took that gamble, and now it's gone disastrously wrong. And Peter Mandelson is ruined by what's been revealed in those files, whether or not he faces trial, conviction, and possible imprisonment, although it seems likely, given the time of the arrest, at least going to spend some time in a police cell tonight. He's ruined, but also the judgment of successive Labour leaders has been ruined. But I stress, by what's been revealed, not what they knew at the time when they appointed Peter Mandelson.
And Daisy, as Adam says, this is about the Prime Minister's judgment as well.
Yes, of course it is. And I take Adam's point, but that reputations have been ruined by what's been revealed, but also it does speak of a lack of judgment, because Peter Mandelson has been sacked more than once, and he has been proven to have not told the truth to people who asked him questions, whether it was about mortgages, whether it was about his friends in high places, his very, very rich associations who he got freebie holidays from or whatever. So for somebody to come back and continually trust the word of somebody who's been sacked multiple times before, I think that on its own shows a lack of judgment, because you are trying to convince the public that you are not like the 14 years of Tory chaos, that you are a whole new regime. So why take the risk of bringing somebody like Peter Mandelson back into the fold? I think that was very, very ill-advised. Stupid.
I think it's important we should stress that he's obviously denied wrongdoing.
Yes, of course.
And also the previous cases don't apply to this case. But no, I take your point. And Liz, let's get your reaction as well.
Well, of course, we had the First Secretary today talking about bringing forward the papers for scrutiny in early March, next week, possibly. And what I would be very concerned now if the government use this as a reason not to bring them forward, because frankly, the purpose of scrutining those papers is to find out why he was appointed as US ambassador. It's not the same thing as the charge, the arrest that we now know of misconduct in public office. So it's perfectly possible for the government to bring forward these papers, have them at scrutiny with the Intelligence and Security Committee. But I am worried now that the government will use this police action as a reason not to release the papers. It's perfectly possible to have decent scrutiny within the Houses of Parliament through the ISC, and the government mustn't be allowed to wiggle off the hook with this, because in all honesty, this is exactly what the question is. We need to know what the Prime Minister and his advisers knew when they appointed Peter Mandelson, which is not the same thing as misconduct in public office. And that is exactly where we need to come to the judgment about the Prime Minister's judgment. Many of us have doubts about it. Those papers, I think, will prove it, and the government mustn't be allowed to wriggle off the hook and delay those.
Can I come back to you very shortly, Daisy? I know you want to come in, but we've got Graham Weston on the line. This is our police commentator, and I just want to bring him into the conversation as well. Graham, thank you so much for joining us. Graham, what would Peter Mandelson's afternoon have looked like? We know that officers were in his home for, I think, about half an hour.
Yeah, it looks like they went into his home address. He'd have been arrested there, put into a police car by the detectives, driven to a police station. Ordinarily, when you make an arrest, you then call up the control room and ask to be allocated a custody suite, a police station you can take them to. And they just literally work on like a rota basis, see where the spaces are, see where you are in London and what's the nearest one to you. It's possible, though, that detectives on this occasion may have already booked a custody suite for him. They could even opened up one of the older police stations. All they need is a custody sergeant to be waiting there for him. But more likely, he's gone to one of the normal custody suites. They'd have called up, said they got one arrest in. The space would be allocated at a police station somewhere in London, driven to the custody suite, and then booked in as every other detainee is. If there's a queue, he would have joined the queue to be booked in, walked in front of the custody sergeant. The facts of the arrest related to the custody sergeant, who then authorises detention, tells the person being detained why they're being detained, the offence they're being detained for, and then they will read them their rights. The right to have a solicitor present, the right to have someone informed of their arrest. Now, you can nominate a solicitor if you have one. possibly likely in this case, or the duty solicitor is then called for you. Then be searched. But your personal property is bagged up and sealed. So wallets, phones, keys, belts, ties, etc., shoelaces, put into a property bag and sealed. Normal practice now is for fingerprint, photograph and DNA to be taken on arrival. And then if your legal representative isn't at the police station, by that stage, you are put into one of the cells to wait for your legal rep to turn up. What will then happen is the legal representative turns up. They are then given almost like pre-interview disclosure by the interviewing officers, as in, this is the offence we're interviewing, this is what we're going to, these are the points we're going to ask questions about. So not the full disclosure, but the points they're going to ask questions about during the interview. They then get a private consultation where they decide either to answer the questions, to make no comment, or offer a prepared statement. They will then go into the interview room and the interview commences. As Adam mentioned, though, it's very late in the day to start this process. This could take 2 or 3 hours to be ready for an interview. So there's a possibility he could end up being detained overnight because we put people into a rest period. So they are rested for a suspect interview. We don't tend to interview in the early hours of the morning because people can then say they were too tired to answer the questions, etc.
OK, so there's a possibility he could be held overnight. And remind us on the time frame for any charge. Should remind people he's been arrested, not charged, but it could take months, even years for a charge potentially.
Yeah, possibly. As we've seen with other cases, you have 24 hours an initial detention. So from the time of arrival at the police station, 24 hours. At the 24-hour stage, you then have to go to the superintendent at the police station for an extra, and it's up to 12 hours. But your detention is reviewed after 6 hours initially by the inspector on duty, who then reviews it again after another 9 hours. Then when you hit the 24-hour stage, the superintendent will be approached for a further detention up to 12 hours. At that stage, it has to go before a court for a warrant of further detention. But as we've seen in some other cases, there's a possibility you're either released on police bail, or you're charged, or you're released under investigation.
OK, Graham Ashton, thanks so much for your analysis there. Let's bring our panel back in, shall we? Liz, Daisy and Adam are still here. Adam, I mean, they were extraordinary images, weren't they?
Yeah, absolutely extraordinary. And I think everyone, and I imagine including Peter Mandelson, had expected him to be arrested following the treatment of Prince Andrew, because, you know, there is, or former Prince Andrew, there is a direct parallel in terms of this issue of misconduct in public life. I have to say, there is one question as to why they've been arrested in this way. It's not necessary to arrest people. You can ask them to come in for an interview or whatever. And that has been the way in which the police have gone about this. And indeed, there was an article in the Times by Fraser Nelson making exactly this point. And I do think there is a certain amount of theatre, both in the case of Peter Mandelson and Andrew, in the way they've been treated, that such is the public and certainly the sort of Westminster level of disapproval of their behaviour, that the police have taken the opportunity to almost do what they do routinely in America, which is the so-called perp walk of bringing people out to humiliation. And when this is all over, I fully understand the public outrage with what they've done. Perhaps people will ask questions as to whether this has been handled properly.
Adam, on that, I get your point that perhaps there is a bit of the authorities wanting to be seen very publicly to be doing their job. But this particular story, you know, the whole Epstein story, the fact that there's suspicions now that there is an establishment elite who are running everything, you know, in this murky world behind the scenes, I think that also lends itself to the authorities needing, not just wanting, but needing to be seen very publicly to be doing their job without favour and without looking like they're giving the establishment a special deal.
Most people who are arrested don't have, to the knowledge of everyone, cameras parked outside their house, do they?
Yeah. But nonetheless, I think what people will take away from this week is these striking images of these men who have been very, very powerful in UK public life, in international public life, seeing their status allegedly evaporating before their eyes. And the fear and that loss of power. But at the same time, let's just take a step back. What they're being charged with is this misconduct in public office. Not a good thing, but it's not the same as trafficking. And you'll have heard over and over again that we should remember, as we should.
Arrested, we should say.
The chart will arrest and yes, with misconduct in public office. But it is striking how there have been no arrests or charges in relation to trafficking. And that brings us back to what has happened to the victims of Al Fayed, and we know what has happened to the victims of Epstein.
And that really, in America,
this has not happened in America at all. I'm sure that the Met Police and Thames Valley Police are very aware of that. But there is something here that fundamentally we know those who have suffered most deeply at the hands of Epstein are those children.
No, you're entirely...
And there is no action on that.
Well, you're entirely correct in that. And the real question now is whether, in the case of Mandy and Andy, this whole thing could broaden out, because obviously the police investigate. Sometimes they arrest people and then they, for example, find something on the devices which they go through, the computers or the phones. And we have the former Prime Minister, Gordon Brown, actually sending evidence to the police relating to, as far as we can understand, the trafficking and the use of planes, and suggesting that there may be some connection with, certainly with former Prince Andrew, but possibly with Mandelson. So it could, it could go wider, is all I'm saying.
Only just to pick up on Liz's point.
That is the real jeopardy which they're in.
There are 8 other police forces, English police forces, who are looking in specifically to the trafficking allegations. And I think those allegations are harder and more complicated, even though we know public office, misconduct in public office is an incredibly difficult accusation to prove and so on. But they are working off documents, that enormous dump of documents. And the trafficking investigations we're led to believe that is all about the jet and when it landed at various English airports. And we know that those investigations are ongoing.
And that's really interesting, because that was raised when Epstein was arrested back, 7 years ago. Looking at the security detail and the records of what they held was raised at the time. And it has taken till now for us to realise that the RAF only keep records for 30 days and the police may not keep records for long enough either. There is a fundamental question. I mean, so one of the big shifts that has happened is this sort of culture of deference. And now we realise, those questions were raised back then, nothing came of them. But now something is beginning to come up, and it's revealing the fact that they're not necessarily going to reveal all that much to us.
We're going to pause there, if that's OK. We will come back to you, Adam, I promise. But let's speak to our legal affairs commentator quickly, Joshua Rosenberg. I just want to talk to you about this offence of misconduct in public office. It is quite unusual, isn't it?
It is an unusual offence, except, of course, this is the one that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was arrested for and presumably questioned about last week. It's, as I was saying to you and your colleagues last week, it's what lawyers call a common law offence. In other words, it's one laid down by the judges. The government's been under pressure for some years, successive governments, to actually put it onto a statutory footing, and indeed there is a bill before Parliament that would do just that. But the bill hasn't yet been passed, and indeed it wouldn't be retrospective anyway. So what the police have got to fall back on is this judge-made offence, which says that it's an offence for a public officer, and that presumably includes a trade envoy, it certainly includes a government minister, who is acting in that capacity, acting as such, and willfully neglects to perform his duty or misconducts himself to such a degree as to amount to an abuse of the public's trust in the office holder, and without, and this is important, without reasonable excuse or justification. Quite complicated, but you get the general idea. If somebody is misconducting themselves to such a degree as to amount to an abuse of the public's trust in that person, well, that's a criminal offence. And because it's never been limited by Parliament, the maximum sentence is life imprisonment.
These allegations relate back to 2008, we think, his time in Gordon Brown's government. Does that make the job for police more difficult because it was such a long time ago?
Well, I think that this sort of case depends on a paper trail, although when we say paper, we mean electronic records. And the question really is whether the electronic records still exist, whether they've been preserved. Now, governments keep some papers, for many years, and they're released after 30 years or whatever it may be. But other records, emails and so on, may well be destroyed. So what the police are going to have to do is not just look through Peter Mandelson's computers to see if there are any emails from nearly 20 years ago, and I don't know how many of us still have our emails going back that far, systems change, but also look at public records, departmental records, ministerial records, and see what information they can put together and whether they can assemble a case.
And as you were saying, it would need to be proved that he willfully misconducted himself. I mean, is the bar for that quite high?
Yes, although again, it's going to be quite tricky because since it's something that is case-based, any court trying anybody for this offence has to go back through past cases, see what previous judges have said, work out what this means in modern language, and so on. It's all a bit uncertain. Although, as I think I said last week, we did raise this with the Director of Public Prosecution, Stephen Parkinson, at a briefing nearly 2 weeks ago, when it looked as if people might be arrested for these charges. And he said that it was perfectly straightforward. It was, after all, laid down by a court just over 20 years ago in the terms that I've been describing, and he thought there would be no difficulty in giving the police the advice they need from the Crown Prosecution Service if they were to make arrests and want to bring charges.
Do you think the government would have known that Peter Mandelson was going to be arrested?
No, I don't think so, because the whole point of perhaps turning up at an unexpected time of day, not first thing in the morning, but quite late in the afternoon, is the element of surprise. You want to see what somebody will say as soon as they arrive on the doorstep. We saw that one of the detectives was wearing a body-worn camera just in case Peter Mandelson actually said anything when they arrived. We don't know what that might have been or anything that he might have said. And also because you don't want them to destroy documents or whatever it may be. So the police would tell as few people as possible. We do know that when they were about to arrest Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, they did tell the Home Office an hour earlier, but that may be what that particular force, Thames Valley, did. And when they were arresting a former member of the royal family, it might be that the Metropolitan Police in London would take a different approach when they're arresting a member of the House of Lords and a former minister.
A point that our panel have been making here is that police could have just questioned him. They didn't need to arrest him necessarily. Was there a degree of theatre in this?
I think that is a fair point. And don't forget that the Metropolitan Police may be seen as playing catch-up in a way to Thames Valley Police. Somebody might say to the Met, well, look, that other force has arrested that other suspect, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. How come you haven't arrested Peter Mandelson? I don't know whether that's how these things work. But yes, I can see that this is very public. The police will have known perfectly well that there were cameras outside Peter Mandelson's home, presumably have been for several days, and that this would all be very visible and on camera and on Sky News and other news networks. So there may be some of that. There is a fact. It is a fact that when you arrest somebody, you're able not just to search them, as your crime commentator was explaining, but you can also search where they live. But we're told by the Metropolitan Police that they obtained search warrants, apparently for Peter Mandelson's homes in London and in Wiltshire. So again, it might not have been necessary. On the other hand, if you're going to search somebody's home, you certainly don't want that person in their home. So it would certainly facilitate the search of his home in London if he wasn't there.
OK, Joshua Rosenberg, thank you for joining us on this significant day. Well, the pictures you can see now are outside Peter Mandelson's home, where he was arrested in North London earlier. Liz, Daisy and Adam are still here, and as you can see, they've been joined by our chief political correspondent, John Craig. John, what was your reaction to this news today?
Well, Joshua touched on it really, just how public the whole thing was. I mean, the timings are, the police, those officers arrived at about 4:15 in the afternoon. So they would have been seen arriving by all the journalists and the photographers and camera crews that were there. And then it was about half an hour later, about 4:45, when these pictures were shot. Peter Mandelson, faced like thunder, as some have said today, and being led away by the two officers. And then the confirmation that he'd actually been arrested came just after 5 o'clock, about a quarter of an hour or so after this happened. There are those, other politicians have said that did they really need to arrest him? David Blunkett, a former Home Secretary, has said this evening they could have just been interviewed at home. A bit of a show, he said. I mean, you'll remember this, when the Cash for Honours and Tony Blair was fretting, wasn't he, about being questioned by the police. And I can't remember, he wasn't interviewed under caution, was he? That was 2007, I think it was. But I mean,
people. I mean, in the past, people have been asked to go to a police station and been arrested, and then been arrested at a police station. It's possible to do it. And just on the point Joshua Rosenberg was making, Peter Mandelson's homes, as indeed the homes of former Prince Andrew, both of them have already been searched. I mean, Peter Mandelson's were searched last weekend. We saw the police going in. We saw the police taking material away. Peter Mandelson had his devices confiscated and subsequently returned to him. So the argument that they were going to arrest him and then search his home, it doesn't apply in this case.
Well, they did.
It's already been done.
That's right. They said that in their statement. The arrest follows search warrants at the two addresses. Now, we know those searches began on the 6th of February, just over 2 weeks ago, and we saw a few days later boxes being taken away from, I think it was the house in Wiltshire, possibly the one in near Regent's Park as well. But in the middle of the afternoon, broad daylight, and Andrew, of course, his arrest was first thing in the morning, and we didn't know about it, I don't think, until after it had happened, did we? No. But, I mean... arrested live on TV, well, not quite live on TV, but almost.
And also on the point of lawyers, we know that Peter Mandelson has been visited by lawyers who've been identified in the media already, so there wouldn't have been a question of calling a duty solicitor. Daisy,
I mean, it's extraordinary to think. Last week we saw the King's brother being arrested. Now we are seeing this towering figure in the Labour Party being arrested. It's worth taking stock.
No, it is. And actually on this issue of whether the Home Office knew, and obviously we did find out last week after Andrew's arrest that Yvette Cooper did know just before, and Joshua was saying maybe...
Mahmood.
Sorry. Maybe it would have been the same in this case, or maybe it wouldn't because this is a Labour Party figure. One of the things I found fascinating last week is that the arresting officers who drove from Thames Valley to Norfolk, which is a 3-hour journey, they didn't know who they were going to arrest when they were dispatched because there was so much secrecy around Andrew's arrest. So again, you wonder, did these Metropolitan Police arresting officers, did they know who they were going to arrest on the way?
Are you telling me that police are being told, right, you're going to Norfolk? Yeah, I think I know who we're going to go and see in Norfolk.
But it wasn't put on any official channels. It wasn't because they were so concerned that it would leak, which, I mean, that tells you something about
it did seem to come
the
as
leakiness.
A total surprise. Yeah. Liz, what are your thoughts?
For Peter Mandelson?
Yeah.
I mean, if the houses were searched previously, we know what has been released so far on the Epstein files. I would venture to say, purely in layperson's terms, that I would imagine that there is a lot that has been released in the Epstein files, which is what has been looked at, has been considered, is this sufficient evidence to reach a certain threshold? And we're looking for more evidence on top of that. We shall wait and see what happens. At the same time, of course, this is a political scandal. This is a massive political scandal for the government. And they have a duty now to behave. If they were talking about the end of Tory chaos in 2024, it's their duty now to make sure that they act appropriately and with honour.
I think it has been confirmed by the chairman of the Intelligence and Security Committee that they will be releasing documents. So your fear perhaps that things are going to be withheld doesn't appear to be standing. Although where I can see a complication, again, I'm not a lawyer, is were they to actually be charges laid against Lord Mandelson. We know that the police early on did say they didn't want anything to be revealed that could damage their prosecution. But of course, as you pointed out, the so-called Mandelson files don't relate to these crimes. They relate to the judgment of the government.
To his appointment as ambassador.
How difficult are the next few days going to be for the Prime Minister?
Well, you know, lost in all this is the fact that the Prime Minister's announced another ethics investigation into another minister this evening, Josh Simons, who was, as has been reported in the Sunday Times as elsewhere, when he was at Labour Together, put effectively a private firm into investigating the background of journalists. There have been calls for Josh Simons to be sacked as a minister. Of course, he didn't do that when he was a minister. So all of this is just contributing, and even, you know, even this by-election which is taking place, the cause of the by-election was to do with conduct of MPs. So all of this is damaging the reputation of politics and politicians in general. And I have to say, obvious thing for Kemi Bade not to do, and she's been quite effective in stirring this up. But, you know, when she was describing the conduct of this government in terms of its lack of direction and just wanting to be, you know, one did think back not very far to the previous, you know, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss era. And my feeling is, I don't think this is necessarily going to be bad just for the Labour Party. I think it will be bad for what people used to call the natural parties of government, which is the Conservative and the Labour Party.
And this evening, we were meant to be talking about special educational needs reform, this huge package of reforms, and suddenly we've had to change the entire programme.
The Conservatives, of course, are going for Starmer, both Kemi Badenoch and your interview with Sir Mel Stride as well. It's all about the Prime Minister's judgment. And, of course, we keep... I mean, the very moment that arrest was taking place and the police were in Peter Mandelson's house, Darren Jones was on his feet in the House of Commons talking about the release of what he called the first tranche of documents as early as next week. He said early March. And there were plenty of MPs in the House... mostly Labour MPs. You mentioned the Josh Simon story. There was fury on the Labour benches about the Josh Simon saga as well. And there were MPs saying during the Mandelson exchanges, you know, most people would have said you wouldn't touch Peter Mandelson with a barge pole, Andy MacDonald, a left-wing Labour MP, said. And, of course, my mind keeps going back to an interview that Peter Kyle gave on Sky News to Trevor Phillips. I think it was round about September, when he said that appointing Peter Mandelson was a risk worth taking. My goodness, what a risk it turned out to be.
Come back to halt. Then we will come back to you, our panel. But joining me now is the political historian, Sir Anthony Selden. Thank you very much for joining us. I just want to give a bit of a sense of the significance of Peter Mandelson in the Labour Party. Can you do that for us?
Yeah, so this is an enormous scandal. It's much bigger than Profumo, which was a comparatively contained affair. He was close to 3 prime ministers over 30 years. He was the creator, primarily the creator of New Labour, which saw Labour in power for 13 years, and he never went away. And he was a giant. He was the grandson of someone, Herbert Morrison, who helped create Labour as a party of government, and he always tried to honour, he said, the legacy and the memory of his grandfather, and yet now he seems to be playing a significant part, not in destroying the Labour Party, obviously it's going to carry on, but very significantly damaging it.
He called himself the third man, didn't he, in his autobiography? He really was right at the levers of power. He wasn't Prime Minister, but he was, as he called it, the third man.
Well, yeah, and of course that's an unfortunate reference if one thinks about the film. But he created the sense of New Labour, and I think the damage that he did, and there's a straight line through to Morgan McSweeney, is a belief that, you know, it's really just a game, government, and what you've got to do is to just outmaneuver and swizzle the opposition and come up with focus groups and a little death move here, and then you're going to be finding out from polling and you jink a little bit over there. No, no, no. Governments throughout British history, the good governments have been had a story to tell. That's an overworked phrase, but they did have a story to tell, and they were concerned with governing, and they are re-elected not because they have jinked around and listened to focus groups and listened to polling, but because they're conviction governments and they do things. There's an arc to the premiership. They are people who know how to govern, and that's very different from the game of political advisors and politicking. And he really brought that into the Labour bloodstream, and that then became part of the general story. He, more than anybody, it was London weekend television, much more than Oxford, where he'd been a student, that educated him in the way that politics is a game. It's a game of images and impressions. It's about what you can convince people of. It's about instant rebuttal, rather than a much more serious thing, which Harold Wilson, James Callaghan, Clement Attlee, who his grandfather worked for, the great Labour prime ministers knew in their blood. It's a very serious game of governing.
Anthony, Adam Bolton would like to ask you a question, so I'll let him do that.
Well, with all due respect, I just want to say you may be right, and you are right about Peter Mandelson's concern about image, but the account you've given of his significance in the Labour Party is, you said yourself, politics is about governing, it's about getting elected. Well, the Blair government, of which Peter Mandelson was an architect, was elected 3 times. It wasn't a totally content-free electorate, nor was the philosophy of New Labour and what New Labour tried to do simply about image and presentation. And if I may say so, I think that's a rather partisan presentation of the significance of Peter Mandelson, who I fully agree has disgraced the party and has destroyed so much of what he achieved. But to just dismiss it as about presentation and spin, I don't think is justified.
OK, so we might disagree on that, Adam. I think
talking about getting elected, for example, the Blair government won 3 elections. Are you saying that was entirely hollow?
No, but I think that there'd have been a better government. I think Blair would have been a better prime minister if it had been more substantial and if there'd been more thought put in before, just like Keir Starmer, more thought put in, and you may well disagree, I think you do, more thought put into what we're going to do with
more thought, wasn't there? There was a book called The Project, which Peter Mandelson co-authored. I mean, this is, the man has fallen. He's disgraced himself. He's damaged his party. But to just dismiss three governments in succession is nonsense, frankly, Anthony.
But I think you're doing that. I think you're the one getting emotional here. I'm saying that I think that he would have served the prime ministers better if more thought had been once Tony Blair got into power. As Tony Blair himself admits, when his political capital was at its high point, he didn't use his opportunity to govern and to make the changes that Britain so desperately needed. So I think it's a question of clearly Mandelson was very significant, and his style of politics was important, and other parties have followed it in this country and abroad. But I think that essentially politics, once you're in power, that governing is different to campaigning. And I don't think that was a switch that he properly advocated. And I think that was the shame of, that was the pity for New Labour, that the legacy after 13 years wasn't more substantial and it wasn't heavily enough put towards solid governing. I think the similar story about this current government with Keir Starmer, that had such an extraordinary opportunity with that majority in July 2024 to actually get on and govern and make the changes that the country was longing to see, and to get ahead of issues like AI and other huge concerns like an aging population and the crumbling social services that we wanted to see.
Okay,
and telling an economic story.
We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for answering our questions and for answering Adam Bolton's as well. Well, you are looking right now at live pictures of Peter Mandelson's home where he was arrested earlier. And as we've been saying throughout our coverage this evening, we should say that Lord Mandelson has repeatedly denied all wrongdoing, and he's previously apologised for maintaining his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, which he admitted went on for too long. Let's get some final thoughts, shall we, from our panel. John, what are your final thoughts this evening?
Well, I suppose we now need to, obviously, we wait and see what happens to Lord Mandelson, and I suppose Andrew Mountbatten Windsor as well. But I'm suddenly starting to get a bit, these documents that are coming in early March, and wondering what's going to be in those.
Next week?
Yeah, potentially, yes. I think that's possibly the next embarrassment for Sir Keir. And I know that you say the Tories, of course, had a bad record as well on sleaze, but the fact is that the opposition are making hay with this particular scandal. Kemi Badenoch, Sir Ed Davey, they all will. Stephen Flynn of the SNP, Plaid Cymru.
OK, we don't have long. Let's get to you, Adam, for your final thought.
Well, I think, of course, they will stir it up. All I was talking about was the impact of people out there, the extent to which they're going to pay attention to the details of this and whether they're just going to think that there's a political class that has behaved disgracefully. And the other point I would make at this stage is whether or not Peter Mandelson or Prince Andrew end up serving time, they are already ruined and utterly disgraced, and they have brought down many people around them as well.
They have, whether or not they're rotten apples or whether or not they're indicative of the wider society. But both of those individuals were meant to be serving the public with service and duty. And the suspicion and the whiff is that they were simply feathering their own nest and buddying up to billionaires in order to get gains for themselves, and totally disregarding the innocent victims of those people. So this has done huge damage to politics and the royal family. And we're at the beginning, not the end.
Liz, very briefly, your final thoughts.
It means we can question everything, doesn't it? We were exposed to accept the royal family and be utterly deferent to them. And we've now seen so much revealed about the Queen, how it appears that she protected possibly her favourite son, and now her favourite son has fallen utterly from grace. Perhaps we're growing up.
And as the Shadow Chancellor put it, a dark day for the Labour Party. Do you think the Prime Minister is going to find the next couple of days very, very difficult?
Well, I mean, I don't think anybody would be betting on his longevity. OK, thank you so much to our panel. Liz, Daisy, Adam Bolton, our political commentator, and John Craig, our chief political correspondent. Well, that is it from us on a very significant day here in Westminster. Peter Mandelson, architect right at the top of New Labour. 6 months ago, our man in Washington has been arrested on suspicion of misconduct in public office. I will see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Up next, it is the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mee. Thank you so much for watching this evening, a significant evening in Westminster. We will see you tomorrow night.